All right. Good morning. Tuesday, May 23rd. Celebrating in Alberta today because it rained most of our province, that there were fires. So I think our fires are under control now, which is fantastic. And I want to talk today about the law of sacrifice, which I think is such an important universal law to chat about because I believe it's misinterpreted, or even the context of sacrifice is misinterpreted. And so, I watched my family, and particularly my parents, make sacrifices in their life, sacrifices in their relationship. So when I first started to read the universal laws, there's actually three laws that I was like, nah, and two that I refused to read. So the law of forgiveness was one of them. I was like, I'm good, right? I don't need to read that. And very judgmental. And then the universal law of sacrifice and the universal law of obedience were two that I thought, without even reading them, I'd made the decision that it was just bullshit, so that I would take what I like and leave the rest, but I wouldn't even read it. That was the first time around in the late 1990s. And then when my former husband and I split up and I moved to Red Deer, and I was in lots of trouble, like spiritually, mentally, emotionally, I picked up the book again and started to read it from beginning to end, and didn't decide which laws I would practice and which I wouldn't practice, that I would endeavor to practice them all and to embody them all. And so the universal law of sacrifice I had to read over and over again, because in my experience, in my, I would say, judgment, sacrifice was sacrificing oneself for someone else. And I'd had a difficult time observing that of my parents, both at different times, right? Or my friends, or even realizing myself sacrificing myself for someone else. But the truth is, the universal law of sacrifice isn't about sacrificing ourselves for someone else, but rather making decisions and sacrificing behaviors. So sacrificing, letting go of a limiting belief is a sacrifice in order to bring in a new belief, in order to make a new decision. If I'm, as silly as it sounds, we have choices. I'm choosing, there's chicken and there's beef. I can have one or the other. I tend just to have both, but by the way, but for the sake of this, if there was one or the other, and I decided to have steak, I was sacrificing the decision to have chicken. So it's making a decision. But even deeper than that, it's about discipline. And I think this is kind of the challenge that we have as the human species, is in even in the word discipline, because for, again, not everybody, but for a lot of people, discipline doesn't have a positive connotation to it. It has negative energy around it. And what happens when a child doesn't behave? They get disciplined. And depending on the era that you grew up in, your discipline would be different, right? So timeouts were a thing when I was raising my kids. You gave them a timeout. That was the discipline. When I was growing up, the discipline was isolation, like sent to the room, it's a little bit different, or the belt. And so, or the loss of something, right? You want to go out and you don't behave. And so then you're disciplined by having something removed from you. And the challenge, even going deeper than that, is as children, a lot of us experience, not on purpose, but when we've misbehaved or we haven't behaved in a way that our parents wanted us to, there's an actual withdrawal of love. And because we will withdraw our attention, or attention was withdrawn from us, then we associate in our brain discipline with a lack of love. And, or then if you're growing up, you might have heard your parents say, this is harder on me than it is on you. I'm doing this because I love you. And depending on your role that you had as a child, you may have accepted that, or you might have, if you had the role of the rebel, as an example, you might be like, no, that's bullshit, right? So there's all of this previous meaning that we have around the word sacrifice. And so from the universal law perspective, what sacrifice is simply making a decision and sacrificing one behavior for the other. That's one example. And the key is to become more disciplined. Now, again, use a different word if discipline's a challenging word for you. Because what we want to learn how to do is to, this is where the intellect comes in, the conscious thought comes in. If we have an intention and we have a goal, there are decisions all the way through that will be constantly be made. And we may have to, quote unquote, break the habits, bring in new habits. And I'm not even referring to like a good habit or a bad habit, like even just pulling those words away and just understanding what that looks like. So simple examples can be, if you're wanting to meditate in the morning, and let's say currently you get up at 7 a.m. and your day starts and you have a morning routine already, and then you want to meditate, you might need to get up at 6:30. And so what you're doing is, yes, you're making a decision, but you're sacrificing to make a new routine. You're sacrificing time in bed in order to do this. And so the intention really is to sacrifice something of a lower density nature, even sometimes. So if I'm wanting to develop a new habit, I might need to sacrifice a poor attitude for a better attitude. And so sacrifice simply is around what we're giving up in order to gain. We're sacrificing, but we've been conditioned to have sacrifice mean different things. And then you store that in your body. You store those decisions, that sacrifice, especially if there's trauma has different meanings for different people. So, but our body remembers the trauma. So we store the trauma in our body. And so there's different tools that you can use to release some of the trauma. One is called the vagus nerve stimulation. There's on YouTube, there's like solfeggio notes that you can listen to do that. But another way to do is if you're, you can be sitting up if you want to, but you just clasp your hands back here like this and put your shoulders back like this. And you keep your heads, this is hard, keep your head straight, but put your eyes one way. And you hold that as long as you can. And eventually what will happen is you'll have a sigh. And then what you're doing is you're releasing that trauma. And then you do it for the other side as well. So just clasp your hands back here like this, right? Thumbs down like this, shoulders back, release. And the hardest part is like keeping this, because we will want to do this, right? And you'll feel a sigh. Now it could take a while. The first time I did it, I think I had to do it for like 2 or 3 minutes. Felt like forever. But that's one way to release trauma. Another way to release trauma is if you're laying on the floor on your bed and you bring your knees up and then put your feet together, right? And so I don't know if I can do this without explaining it. So you lay in the bed, your knees are up like this, your feet are together like this, and you take your legs back so they're flat against the bed. Hopefully this makes sense. And you slowly bring them up towards you. And then you stop when they start to shake. And you hold them for as long as you can there and just let your legs shake. And you may feel like when you're doing that your whole body needs to shake, or you'll want to move your body, like take your legs this way and that way. You might want to like literally do this and just allow your body to do that, because what you're doing is you're releasing trauma from your stored cells, from your memory. Those are two really, really simple ways that you can do that. So you have, within the universal law of sacrifices, you have an intention, you have a desire and an intention, and then new decisions will be made, and you might need to bring in new behaviors. And when you need to bring in new behaviors, that's when you use universal law of sacrificing, right? Something of a lower density, or sacrificing a habit that you have for a new habit. And we're not used to making these kinds of sacrifices, right? We have free will, and we're comfortable in our conditioning. And so what this is really is talking about is facing your discomfort and realizing where you're conditioned, and then making a decision to let go of the conditioning, to do what is necessary to let go of the conditioning. And that can be that's where the discipline, that the self-discipline comes in. So it's, imagine if and you can use your affirmations. So an example would be, when I was bodybuilding, one of my affirmations was, I'm an athlete and I'm a bodybuilder. And when I first started, I had a hard time with that because I'd never considered myself an athlete and I wasn't a bodybuilder. So the affirmation started out as, I choose to bodybuild. I choose to be a bodybuilder. I choose to be an athlete. I also added, I choose to think like a bodybuilder. I choose to think like an athlete. And I noticed that there's several habits that athletes had and bodybuilders had, and which was that everything they did was for the benefit of the sport that they loved. So they ate, right, to energize their body for the sport. They drank to energize their body, to hydrate for the sport. They slept for the sport. They had the mindset for the sport. And it was just a really simple example for me, because I was wanting to mimic and model the behavior of someone who was athletic in nature, even so. And what I realized was, it was not right or wrong, but I ate out of boredom. I ate out of stress. I ate for pleasure. I ate to celebrate. I didn't eat to fuel my body. And when I realized that that was one of the key differences between how I was eating and how an athlete ate, I decided to adopt the nature of following what they were doing for the time that I was bodybuilding. So I switched my behavior around food, and I had a very tumultuous relationship with food up until then. So we can look at things that we want to do, attract, accomplish. We can create the frequency of who do we need to be. So I knew that I needed to be an athlete, but I also knew that I needed to be courageous and I needed to be organized. There were other things that I needed to be. And notice how I didn't say do, but be. Who do I need to be? So when you're making these decisions of who do you decide who do you need to be? And then what choices and decisions need to be made, and what sacrifices might need to be made. Okay? I was working with the healthcare practitioner around my body. And when we first started working together, she asked me, how much coffee do I drink? And I said, well, I have a French press a day. That's it. I don't drink in the afternoon. I just have this really big ass cup of coffee in the morning. And I found, because I don't drink coffee anymore, that that helps focus with my ADHD, which is true. A stimulant will help us focus and help us calm down. And I was still struggling 3 months after we started working together, and asked her what's going on. And she said, I think it's coffee. So until you're willing to give up coffee, it's kind of a moot point. And I said to her, well, I don't I don't agree with you. And she said, I know, that's why I'm assuming you don't agree with me. That's why you haven't given up coffee. But she said, what if I'm right? And she said, no, and the one thing standing in your way is coffee. And so I thought, well, like, okay. I mean, obviously there's still something going on. And so I decided to let go of coffee. But I also know when building habits or creating new habits, it's not about just bringing in a new habit, it's about letting go of a habit. So I just switched coffee to something else. So I sacrificed, right, my desire for coffee to keep me focused in the morning for my health in a different way. And so there's decisions that need to be made every single day, especially when you're following your desires. And so sometimes we need to make those sacrifices. So I'll go back to, and being guided to go back to, we're not meant to sacrifice our lives for others. That's the conditioning. We're not meant to sacrifice our lives for others. Decisions and choices, sacrificing lower density energy things for higher density. And then one of the reasons why we have such a challenge with the word sacrifice, why we feel punished, according to Holliwell, is that often the law of sacrifice is presented to us as being one-sided. We are taught that if we want to live a good life, we have to give up so many pleasures. How familiar that sounds to some of us. The result is that we rebel, and when we think of sacrifice, we think of the ones who have had to give up so much pleasure for goodness. And so he talks about that. Again, it's not that. But for a moment, you might be sacrificing an immediate pleasure, like my coffee, for something of a greater pleasure. And it's our conditioning, right? It's the meaning that we give it that makes it a challenge. And so he goes further to explain, to share that freedom is not living an obsessed, undisciplined life, but freedom is in being able to control your life and in making it what you want to be. If you wish to become a skilled athlete, an efficient teacher, an expert lawyer, or a beautiful singer, the beginning of such success is first the desire for discipline of your time and thought. So again, sacrifices is making the decision and then sacrificing the things that are necessary, not yourself, right? Don't sacrifice your health for business. Don't sacrifice yourself for relationships, to your business or to other people, right? It's not about doing that. He goes on to say that an undisciplined life is an insane life. And, I had real challenges with that when I first read it, because, of course, when I was growing up, as the role that I used to have as the rebel, right? The meaning that was passed down to me, the meaning that my parents gave about being a rebel, was that I was not disciplined enough. So if you find yourself being triggered today, just take a moment and think about what story is around the trigger and what decisions that can be made around that. And as always, like, you take what you like and you leave the rest. And think about the energy behind the word, and if need be, and there's lots of times we've talked about this together, is that I'll find excuse me, a different word that resonates with me if it's a word that doesn't resonate with me, or I'll explore why I might be in resistance of the energy of the word, because there's so much gold when we have an opportunity to look at what about it that we're resisting. Okay, I'm just going to pause here for a moment. check in. How's everyone feeling? Is someone really you can direct message me. I won't call your name, but is someone really triggered here today? I just need to check in. I've been asked to check in. We good? Someone's not doing really well. That's probably not very good English, but that's okay. Okay. Remember, it's okay. It's okay to not be good, right? It's okay to be triggered. It's okay to be in resistance, and that there's an opportunity to check in there. So I'm just going to do one more check-in. Does anybody have anything that they want to share in this group here? Thoughts? Emily, I'm interested in what you want. So yes, that's why I get to start calling people out now. And you can always pass, by the way, folks. I'm interested to hear what you say because I've been following you about the balanced life. Would you say that discipline is a part of that? Would you have used that word? Would you share your thoughts around what you're thinking?
Okay. Discipline is not, it's not, I can't say that it's not a word that I don't ever use. For me, when I hear the word discipline, I think of my children. Like when they're all grown now, but when they were little,
Yeah.
it's just, that's my first, anytime I hear the word discipline, I think of children.
Yeah.
But I don't know if my audience personally would resonate with the word discipline. Discipline to me is like that's a tricky word,
Right.
Because you can take it in so many, you can take it positively, but it can also have a very big negative
Yeah.
meaning behind it. So yeah, I don't know if
Yeah.
I answered your question, but that's kind
Yeah.
of just
No, I
take
mean,
on it.
yeah, I think it's the dialogue that was wanting to come out maybe versus anything, right? Because discipline is like when I think of discipline, I think of I immediately go to punishment. So like I do, it's like discipline, punishment, and sacrifice. And I think of immediately where I go to is that Jesus sacrificed his life, right? So I go to death. So those two words, discipline means right means punishment. Sacrifice means death. So I've had to work. I will use that word at the meaning of that for me. It's to take the message of what Holywell is sharing with us and work it within my own beliefs and belief systems. So and said, yeah, discipline is rigid, fortitude, JC, right? Having the fortitude, making the decisions. But it's interesting is, I mean, words are so powerful, and we can miss or dismiss the context of the message by a word, by one word, right? We can do that. And so it's really about taking the context of what is he talking about, choices, making decisions, making choices, being in awareness. If our desires are so that we have this desire that's been provided to us by divine source energy, and all the way, all along, we have decisions every day, right? Like we make decisions on, and this is how I kind of wrap my head around it, was we make decisions on how we get dressed, like what we're wearing. So I started saying, I'm making the decision to wear this, so I'm sacrificing the decision to wear this, so that I could let go and release the energy of sacrifice, right? Which is death, and discipline, which meant punishment, for sure. And so Diane said to me, discipline means holding back. My father holding back approval if he thought it didn't do something his way. Right? 100%. 100%. We have challenges with the words. And so we just like I said, we take that and go, isn't that interesting that, right? Because athletes would say they have the discipline. I'm very disciplined in my routine. My son, Leo, I'm not his birth mama, right? He talks about he has the discipline, to go and work out 3 times. And he would say, I had the discipline to go and work out 3 times a day in order for him to achieve what he wants. He knows that the discipline of eating, meal planning, and all of that. So for him, discipline doesn't have that negative connotation, right? And sacrifice for him is the same thing. Although sometimes, after he's done his weight cut, he fights at he weighs at 145 when he goes into weigh-in and does it as healthy as possible. And then the next day when he fights, he's fighting at 170. And so he'll let us know that was a hard sacrifice. That was tough on my body, very tough on my mental capacity. That sacrifice. So he'll say it then, but he doesn't have the same stories that I have. I'll say for myself. So Emily says I use the word dedication. Yeah, that's right. Dedicated. So we can take the words, right? That's the whole point of this, is taking the opportunity of the message and then switch out the word that feels good for us, right? And then if it feels necessary, if it resonates with you, tackle the word, right? Tackle the word that is triggering you. Because there's the only reason why things trigger us is we have a meaning to it. If we can change the meaning to it or make the meaning moot, then we don't have that thing. So, Sherry.
Hey, Ranchelle.
Hi.
What I wanted to share on this topic is, so for me, I'm really kind of what you're just saying, inviting in discipline right now. And it's very positive for me, because I was just looking at this the other day and working in trilotherapy, which, without going on a way tangent on that, is creating balance between head, heart, and center.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I just had a realization that I've spent a lot of time strengthening my heart. And so, like many, when I entered into trilotherapy, I was quite head heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've spent a lot of, energy working on strengthening my heart energy. And then realizing the other day, I was sort of doing some scoring that we do in trilotherapy where we, okay, where, are you, there's 3 parts to each: head, heart, and center, and sort of measuring each of those areas. And I was like, wow, like the areas that I'm quite low in is head. And yet I thought I was so head heavy. And then really having the realization that, okay, now I've sort of swung the pendulum. My heart is strengthened so much. My center is strengthened so much. And I've kind of cut out, in the effort to cut out the, let's say, immature head, or the distorted head, I've cut out the divine head or the divine masculine. And so now I'm like, oh, right. I just kind of threw out the baby with the bathwater.
Right.
And so now I'm in that space where it's like, yeah, I want to welcome in the divine masculine. And discipline to me is, yeah, one of those beautiful divine masculine strengths that I now, from a business perspective, I'm wanting to call in more of that. So yeah, I see that as a beautiful divine strength, to have the discipline to achieve, the things that I want to achieve. So I just wanted to share that.
I love that. That's a great contribution. Thank you. And the other thing that just came to me as you said that is the discipline really is, I think, has that divine masculine energy to it. Right. So there can be a lot of heaviness for some of us if we either we're heavy in our masculine energy, sacrificing the feminine energy for the masculine energy. So because that becomes the less of a divine feeling. And if we've had struggled with our masculine relationships, right, within self or with others. So I think there's a lot of different layers to this, as always. And then just made me think of something that I watched on TikTok this morning, which is it's not Ryan Gosling, but the other Ryan, our Canadian actor. Who is it, Tracy? Thank you.
Ryan Reynolds.
Thank you. This is going to drive me crazy. And they're talking about how many his net worth being, I think, in the billions now, and he's not made his money from acting, but what he does is he's purchased several different companies. So he goes in, and one of the companies he bought was a marketing company. So he goes in, and then he takes action, and he takes swift action. And so they were talking about that he makes a decision, he takes swift action, and he executes. So when people ask him, why do you think you're so successful? He said, it's because I'm an executor. I don't think too long. I do. He said, I am a ready, fire, aim person, because I know that I can adjust anything. I have a team of people. I'm intelligent enough. I can adjust. I don't wait for perfect timing. I don't wait. I see an opportunity and I execute on it. And so what he does do is he takes companies, he executes on them, and then he turns around and he sells them. Right. So he doesn't hold on to many of his companies, but that's what he does. But what came to me as you were talking is he is in his divine masculine, where he's creating. So divine feminine creating, divine masculine executing. Execution, right? Which is really interesting, because I just went to and I saw someone's head being chopped off. This is the power of words for us, for each individually, right? So I get to do work today on the word execution because I have some negative energy there, right? That I can work through. So this is the power. This is how powerful it is when we take a pause, we stop and we listen, right? We listen to our heart and our head and our gut. It's about that triad factor for sure. Awesome. Anybody have anything else they want to share before we end for the day? We're good. Okay. Thank you so much. Well, big hugs to all of you. I'll see some of you later on today. Ciao. Bye.